almost threw the journal away, not because it was damaged or embarrassing, but because I was convinced it didn't matter anymore. It was sitting at the bottom of a storage box I hadn't opened in years, under old receipts, a few tangled chargers, and a scarf I forgot I owned. I only opened the box because I was looking for a document I urgently needed. That's it. No deep intention, no emotional moment planned. But somehow, my hand paused on that notebook. It was slightly worn, the edges soft from being handled too much at some point in my life. I remember staring at it for a few seconds, debating, why am I even keeping this? I muttered to myself. Still, I sat down. Just for a minute, I told myself. I opened to a random page, and within seconds, I felt something shift. Not dramatically, not in a way that makes you gasp. Just this quiet, uncomfortable recognition, like bumping into a version of yourself you hadn't seen in a long time. The first thing I noticed was how messy the writing was. Not physically emotionally messy, half sentences, thoughts that didn't finish, words pressed into the page like I was trying to force something out of myself. I could tell I wasn't okay when I wrote that. There was an entry where I kept repeating the same line in different ways. I just want things to make sense, over and over, different paragraphs, same meaning. I paused there for a while because I remember that season. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed late at night, phone face down, lights off, just thinking. Not productive thinking, the kind that goes in circles, questioning everything, my decisions, my direction, my relationships, even myself. I didn't trust where my life was going. And that feeling followed me everywhere, even in rooms where I looked completely fine on the outside. I flipped to another page. This one was dated a few weeks later, and this is where it got real. Because I had written about a specific morning. I had woken up already tired. Not the kind of tired sleep fixes, the kind where your body is fine, but your mind just doesn't want to engage with the day. I remember dragging myself through my routine, checking messages I didn't want to reply to, showing up to things I didn't feel present in. And then I wrote this line. I don't want to feel like this all the time. I just want peace. Even if nothing else changes. I stopped reading because that line didn't feel like it belonged to the past. It felt like something I would say now, if I didn't know better. And that's when something clicked. I closed the journal for a second and looked around. The room was quiet. Nothing dramatic was happening. No big breakthrough. No emotional breakdown. Just stillness. And then it hit me in a way I didn't expect. I don't feel like that anymore. Not in the same way. Not with that same heaviness that used to sit on my chest without explanation. And the realization didn't come with excitement. It came with confusion because I couldn't pinpoint when it changed. There wasn't a specific day I woke up and said, oh, everything is better now. There was no big moment. It just faded slowly, quietly. I opened the journal again, but this time I was reading differently, not just remembering, but comparing. There was another entry where I wrote about money, not in a dramatic way, just constant low-level stress, calculating everything, second-guessing every decision, wondering if I was doing enough or doing things right. I wrote, I don't need to be rich. I just don't want to feel this pressure all the time. That line stayed with me because if I'm being honest, I'm still not where I once imagined I would be, but that pressure, it's not there anymore. I'm not constantly checking, calculating, worrying in the same way. There's a steadiness now, a quiet confidence in how I navigate things. And again, I didn't notice when that happened. At this point, I leaned back and just sat there because something about this experience felt almost unsettling, not in a bad way, but in a way that made me question how I've been paying attention to my own life. How many things have changed that I've just normalized? How many prayers have been answered that I've already moved past without acknowledging? Then I turned to a page I almost skipped. It didn't look important at first glance, but it ended up being the one that stayed with me the most. I had written about someone, not in detail, but enough to remember exactly who it was. And the entry wasn't angry. It was exhausted. You could feel it in the words, trying to explain things, trying to fix things, trying to hold on to something that clearly wasn't stable. And then there was this line: I'm tired of feeling like I have to convince someone to treat me right. I exhaled when I read that because that version of me felt very far away. Not because everything is perfect now, but because I don't move like that anymore. I don't over-explain myself. I don't chase clarity from people who create confusion. I don't sit in spaces where I feel like I have to earn basic respect. And that shift didn't come from one decision. It came from multiple small moments: walking away, choosing differently, learning slowly. But looking at that page, I realized something I hadn't fully said out loud before. That prayer was answered. Not in the way I imagined back then. I thought the answer would be a perfect relationship or someone finally understanding me. But instead, the answer was me changing, my standards shifting, my tolerance lowering, my sense of self becoming stronger. And somehow that was better. At this point, I wasn't just reading anymore. I was sitting in something deeper, because page after page, it was the same pattern. Different situations, same core desire: peace, clarity, stability, self-trust. And in my current life, those things exist, not perfectly, not every single day, but consistently enough that they've become normal. And that's what surprised me the most. They became so normal, I stopped recognizing them as answers. I think we expect life to change loudly. We expect some kind of signal, a moment that clearly separates before and after. But what if that's not how it works most of the time? What if change looks like you reacting differently to something that used to break you? What if it looks like a situation not affecting you the way it used to? What if it looks like feeling calm in moments that used to overwhelm you? Because sitting there with that journal, I realized something very simple, but very important. My life didn't suddenly become perfect, but it became lighter, and I didn't stop to acknowledge that. I just adjusted and kept going. There was a moment right before I closed the journal where I read one last entry. It was short, just a few lines. I hope one day I feel like I'm on the right path, even if I don't have all the answers. I smiled when I read that, not because I have everything figured out. I don't. But because I no longer feel lost in the same way. There's a quiet sense of direction now, a trust in my decisions that didn't exist back then. And again, no big moment created that. It just grew. I closed the journal slowly, not because I was done, but because I needed to sit with everything I had just realized. And the thought that stayed with me was this: how many of us are still asking for things that have already started happening? How many of us are waiting for loud confirmations while quiet answers are already present? Since that day, I've started doing something differently. Nothing complicated, just a small pause. Every now and then, I ask myself, what feels easier now that once felt heavy? And every time I answer that, honestly, I see it, the growth, the shift, the answered prayers I didn't celebrate. So if you're watching this and you feel like nothing is working, nothing is changing, nothing is happening, I want you to try something. Go back mentally to a version of yourself from a year ago or even a few months ago. What were you struggling with? What were you asking for? What felt overwhelming back then? And then look at your life now. Not for perfection, just for difference, even the smallest one. Because sometimes the answer didn't come the way you expected. It didn't arrive loudly. It didn't announce itself. It just settled into your life quietly and became something you now live with. Instead of something you're still asking for, I'd really love to hear from you. Have you ever had a moment like this where you realize something you once prayed for had already happened? Or is there something in your life right now that you're starting to see differently? Share it in the comments. I'll be reading. And if this felt like a quiet reminder you didn't know you needed, Go ahead and subscribe to GistOver Cooking. There's more of these conversations waiting for you. I'll see you in the next one.